Hey guys, Ben here and welcome back to another video on The Flash Season 9. Today we're going to be doing my review / breakdown of episode 5 titled The Mask of the Red Death. So if you do go on to enjoy the video, please be sure to leave a like and a comment and subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future DCTV videos later this year. So this is the finale of Red Death. This is the final episode. It's Mask of the Red Death Part 2, so the end of the two-part episode. So this will be leading on to a couple of interlude episodes, including one Supergirl crossover episode with the return of Nicole Maines as Neo now. I'm very excited for that episode. But in this episode, we get the conclusion of the Red Death saga. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. We're going to be going through the episode chronologically. Obviously, we'll get to the big bits when we get to them, so please be sure to stick around throughout the entire video because there's so many twists and turns in this episode. And I have to say straight up, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was one of the better Red Death episodes. Obviously, it's a concluding episode, so they had to live up to it. And I feel like there is some very good moments. There are some not so good moments, a little bit cringy here and there, as it's been in some of the episodes recently. But overall, I would say probably like an 8 out of 10 episode if I'm going to rank it. Alright, so we begin the episode with Mark's supposed death. Well, we don't see him dead or anything, but that's right where we left off at the end of last episode, and so that's what the recap basically says. And then we see the Red Lightning is still kind of coursing over the entirety of Central City, so it's still a huge problem. Momo pays a visit to CCPD, and at that point you're like, okay, why is Red Death and her rogues at CCPD? Like, it's a little bit weird. But then Red Death zips past Kramer and the rest of them, and they are after something in CCPD. It becomes very evident quickly. Kramer tries to fight them off with her mimic powers. She fails, and Red Death says she will show her what true justice looks like, obviously, because that is her mission, and she doesn't believe that the police or the good guys on Earth Prime and this specific timeline are able to do that, so that's why she's on this mission. Kramer hasn't been in much of this season, so it's kind of nice to see her using her powers for once, because she got her powers and she pretty much hasn't used them like more than a couple of times since she got them. But that's just because since Joe left the CCPD, she hasn't had such a big role. Alright, so Barry barely has any speed at the start of this episode, but they realize, Barry and Iris and Team Flash, that they need Cecile's help to trace Red Death / Ryan from this other timeline's feelings, and so it's pretty clear that this is going to be possible because she feels such strong anger, and that's literally all Cecile has to hone in on. And so Red Death can somehow feel Cecile invading her mind as she taps into Red Death's mind, and it doesn't make much sense if I'm being completely honest. Like, this was just the notes that I wrote down when I was watching it. I don't know if there is any precedent for Red Death being able to feel other people's powers. Like, it just doesn't make sense. I don't think Barry would be able to feel like, okay, this is the empath invading his mind. Maybe you get like a headache or something, but I don't think you would actually know who is invading your mind. So I think that's just like a little nitpick that I have. It doesn't make much sense in terms of what we've been told about Red Death and her powers, because she doesn't really have powers by herself. It's actually the suit that has the speedster powers. And so Cecile not only hones in on CCPD, but she also gets a different location, and that location has Mark in it, who is supposedly still alive and locked up in Red Death's lair. She becomes incapacitated after using her powers, and she feels Joe's thoughts at that moment, and she feels like something's up. We'll get to what that is about later in the episode because something big happens to do with Joe. And so then we get back to Team Flash, and Keone reveals she wants to rescue Mark along with Barry. She's willing to go no matter what. And the rest of the team wants to take down Red Death because they know where she is as of right now. They've been able to hone in that she's at CCPD thanks to Cecile and her powers. And at that point, the good rogues agree to help because somehow they're able to kind of tap into their kind of good side, which we've been seeing in the last couple of episodes. They aren't bad and they somehow have turned sides, which is obviously a good thing, and I have to admit, I'm kind of liking them being around, even though it's just a temporary thing. I mean, they all have their own motivations, especially to get rid of Red Death, but they keep on like flip-flopping back and forth between if they're willing to risk themselves or not, or should they save themselves and their families. Alright, so they hack into the CCPD satellites, that being Red Death and her rogues. They upgrade the satellite and she can break past the new Argus updates, which I think is a reference to obviously Arrow, but also Cisco, because most likely he was the one to do that upgrade, so I like that reference right there. Also, Red Death is at this point going a bit insane, and she says, "I am the judge, jury, and executioner." I feel like there's been some cringy moments over the last couple of episodes that people have picked up on, especially to do with like references from the past, from like different Batman films, like I Am Vengeance and stuff. Like, it just didn't make sense in the moment that she said it. It felt like they were parodying something else. And so when she says, "I am judge, jury, and executioner" here, it's like, yeah, it's cool, but then it just doesn't feel like she's super threatening. So I feel like there is kind of a paradox going on where Red Death looks scary, but then some of her movements, like when she approaches Barry later in the episode, it just doesn't feel like she wants to kill him or kill anyone else. However, that being said, Red Death does actually kill someone in this episode, and it's just like a random person on the street. And so yeah, Red Death does kill someone, and as far as we know, probably she's killed other people, but on screen we've literally only seen one person, and it's no one close and dear to us. So I feel like if you compare Red Death to someone like Zoom, you guys remember that scene with Zoom back in season 2 when Zoom was in that room full of police officers and he just like speed snapped everyone's necks? That was crazy, and that really showed just how deadly and how little he cared for anyone. Obviously he was a serial killer, so he's in another playing field than this version of Ryan Wilder who is trying to seek justice, but she's still called Red Death at the same time. So I feel like she has to live up to that name, and killing one person on screen doesn't live up to that name. That's just my opinion. And so we get these individual manifestations of what they call a psychic consciousness. She's getting a neural boost of psychic energy from somewhere else, and so at this point Team Flash tries to figure out exactly what that is, and this is Barry's greatest mistake, as Red Death calls it, because Red Death faces off against Barry. She steals the last of his speed, doesn't even try and kill him. Again, that's just like a nitpicky moment where I was like, okay, why isn't she trying to do more than just steal his speed? Like, what is the benefit of having Barry around? Like, what happens if he gets his powers back? He's going to be able to stop her at one point. She surely knows that, so why not just kill him? Anyway, it's a TV show. They're not going to kill off the main character. We know the answer to that, but that's just like a nitpick. And so Red Death knows about Bashir and Savitar because she mentions it at this moment from this timeline. So I don't know. There's just like these bits and pieces here and there that are not believable in terms of what she knows and what she says. I feel like it's the writers saying stuff through her because they know the past, but she shouldn't technically know this. She's from another timeline, and her experiences aren't the same as our Barry. Like, we know that obviously Savitar was in a different position because he was Barry. He was Barry until a certain point, then he became the Time Remnant, and obviously he has a different history or future to normal Barry because he becomes a completely different person. But it makes sense that he knows Barry's past, and so I just don't understand why Red Death would know about Bashir or Savitar or what they specifically did. And so, talking about Barry's greatest mistake, this is actually a link to the psychic source that is powering Red Death, and that is in fact Grodd. Now, we theorize about Grodd coming to the show since that trailer shot was shown way back when, before episode 1 premiered, and so Grodd is connected to Red Death. And after your crisis, as Red Death said, Grodd never found his tribe. With just a pat on the back from Barry wasn't enough in order to make him some sort of hero or a good guy. But again, how does she know this? Like, it just doesn't make sense unless Grodd has explained it to her, which I doubt he has done. However, I guess maybe there is some way of looking around it that could potentially make sense if Grodd potentially gave her more information and knowledge than she already had in order to help her on her pursuits in this timeline. And so Grodd ended up taking Red Death's offer, all because Barry's lessons of heroism failed to assist him to find his tribe of intelligent gorillas. And so I have to say, Grodd's CGI is kind of shaky, apart from the close-ups, which looked pretty good, those close-ups, because I guess that's where most of the money went into it. And Red Death supposedly can help Grodd find his fellow gorillas, but you don't really believe that, do you? I feel like she's just 100% using Grodd, and so it makes sense that Grodd changes sides by the end of this, because Barry is able to convince him that he should come to the good side and Red Death has to be stopped. And so Red Death is stopped, but first off, the rogues leave as no one is motivated, and they think they've lost against Red Death because Red Death has all of her clones around the city and the lightning is just going crazy. So there is little hope, but Kyon at this point wakes up Mark by kissing him, which is a big moment, definitely teasing what's going to come in the future. I don't know if there's going to be some sort of relationship between the two of them, but it kind of makes sense considering this is like a part of Frost, but also a part of Caitlin. And this is also a tease for Kyon getting powers. We're going to be exploring that next episode. If you saw the trailer after the episode, it actually teases that. And so we go over to Joe and Barry, and they have a little conversation as they normally do from time to time. And Joe tries to say that he's not important to Team Flash, but Barry emphasizes how important he is to the team, because Joe has taught all the heroes and has been a major inspiration behind all of them, which I have to agree with. Like, I think that is not far-fetched. I think he has been here since the start, and he brought up Barry, he brought up Iris, he brought up a lot of them in different ways just by being there and being around. He's like the wisdom of Team Flash. But after this is when Barry approaches Grodd to go get his help to save the world, and obviously, like I said before, Grodd turns sides and gets into Red Death's mind, who is overwhelmed as Grodd takes over, and then she goes absolutely crazy in a kind of cringy moment again, because I feel like all the over-the-top moments with Javicia, I don't know, they're just not super good. But she says, "I will bring justice to this world," before running out and screaming into the air, and somehow Flash finds her. "Come and face me, Flash." It makes sense how Flash finds her because of Chester obviously monitoring where Red Death is. But it's always funny when a villain like puts their hands into the air and is like, "Come find me," or, you know, "Come face off against me." It's a proper comic book moment right there, and I don't know how well it actually crosses over to TV. And Barry's able to come and face off against her because Grodd gave back some of the speed that was still within inside of himself from the last time that we saw Grodd, so that's obviously a very helpful thing. I don't think they planned that back in the past, but I guess they thought it through once they were like, who could we bring back in order to help Red Death put her clones and army out into Central City, and I guess that's at the point when they thought of Grodd. So it's at this point that we get a pretty cool fight scene, if I'm going to be honest. Red Death faces off against the Flash, they run around the city, she kills a dude and uses a lightning boomerang, like multiple of them, and the CGI looked pretty cool in this scene. She even hangs from lightning at one point, which I thought was actually really sick. So let me know, what did you think about this down in the comments below. But this was right before the best moment of the entire episode, which was a batarang hitting Red Death's chest. And it seems to be a special one because it's able to depower Red Death and basically short circuit the suit so she doesn't have access to her speedster powers anymore. Which makes sense because she doesn't actually organically or even artificially have the speed for herself. So it's all in the suit. So once you're able to depower the suit, it just makes sense that Red Death would have no speed anymore. And so, what an entrance. Batwoman appears as the boomerang hits Red Death, and she's like, what's going on? And at that point, I was like, let's go. Batwoman is here. This was awesome. It was cued with this amazing music cue at the same time. And so you wonder in your head, where has she been all this time? But at the same time, you're like, okay, she's finally appeared. She's the one to take down Red Death, which I think is very fitting. And so Red Death is not powerful without her speed. She gets knocked out by Batwoman in that fight. I wouldn't say there's anything too impressive about that fight because it's literally just hand-to-hand combat between the two Javicia Leslies. Obviously, one of them is a stunt double and Javicia's Batwoman. But yeah, it was nice to see the real Ryan Wilder show up and beat Red Death in the final moments. And so that's where we leave this. And after Red Death has been defeated and everyone goes back to Star Labs, Ryan is met by the rest of Team Flash. Obviously, they know about Batwoman and her doings in Gotham. but they still don't explain where she's been all this time. Like, there is no actual explanation, so that's like another nitpick of mine. It just doesn't make sense in terms of the story, because she's been missing. Why has she been missing? Well, clearly it's not to do with Red Death, because Red Death probably would have found her because she can run around the entire city and many different cities, so she's able to show up right in the nick of time. It's a very convenient moment, but it's a cool moment nevertheless. And so Ryan reveals she's a big fan of Iris's work apparently, so that means, you know, they're trying to tease a greater relationship between them. I don't know if we're going to see Batwoman ever again in the show or in the Arrowverse, so this is the last moment, but I guess it was nice. Also, one of the coolest Easter eggs in this episode was Ryan revealing that Kara, Alex and Nia from Supergirl always have a monthly brunch with her. Wow, that was not expected as well, so I really like that. I love when they drop Easter eggs and dropping their names. Just so nice to hear that, yes, they do exist in the Arrowverse still at this point. Kara, Alex and Nia specifically are the ones that hang out with Ryan, and Iris is invited to some of those brunches if she ever wants to go. I guess that's the link between Iris and Nia in this case, because they've never met in real life actually. So I guess Ryan is that branch, but also Kara, because Kara knows Iris and they've met many times before. And so as we head towards the end of the episode and the end of this video, let's talk about Joe, who basically is going to be moving away from the city to the countryside with Jenna, who's going to be leaving Cecile in Central City. So they're only going to come on the weekends and visit Jenna and Joe. So with Cecile being in Central City 5 days a week and only 2 days for the weekend, it's kind of like they're divorced, and I don't know why she's so happy about it and why everyone's happy about it. I get that it's an understanding in terms of, you know, Joe wants to move away but Cecile doesn't, but at the same time, why is Cecile so happy when 5 days a week she's not going to get to see her child, and her child is growing up? Imagine what that's going to be like. That's literally going to feel like, to a kid who is Jenna's age, that her parents are divorced, even though they're still together, they're on good terms and everything. It's literally, Cecile was in Central City for 5 days a week being a hero, and she just abandoned her child until the weekends. Like, I know Joe's there, but it just doesn't make much sense in terms of like human attachment and reality. So that's just like another nitpick, because I don't think in reality they would do something like that. It just makes absolutely no sense in my opinion. But the final scene of the episode is 2 weeks later after this, as Joe has presumably found a place because they're having a farewell party in his house. Barry talks to Mark at this point after Joe does a speech to say goodbye to the rest of the team, which is a great speech. And so Mark just feels like an intruder, but Barry tells him that he's one of them now, which I guess is kind of nice. And then Chalegra kiss in front of everyone, and Barry's like, when did this happen? Which is super relatable. I really like that moment. And yeah, I guess this was just going to happen. I know a lot of you guys are Chalegra haters, but I guess this is just meant to be in terms of what they've been teasing for a while. But one of the biggest moments comes at the end of the episode as Iris feels lightheaded, and then Keown out of nowhere randomly says, "You're pregnant," which leaves everyone in shock, including Iris and Barry. But everyone gets very happy very quick, and they start congratulating, and they're like, oh my god, what's happening? And clearly this is Keown getting her powers. It's a bit random out of nowhere, but we were expecting this, so yay for Iris and Barry having Nora, or maybe even the Tornado Twins. In this version of the timeline, you never know, because this is happening a few months early. It was supposed to happen in like 3+ months. Clearly the timeline has changed. But yeah, so that does it for this video, and that does it for the Red Death saga. Let me know in the comments down below, what did you think of the Red Death saga? I thought it was like fairly good. I wouldn't say it was strong. I would say it was good, but it wasn't bad at all. So yeah, this is like an 8 out of 10 episode. I feel like most of this has been like 6 to 8 out of 10 in terms of episodes, so nothing like super strong, but 8 is like pretty good. So that does it for now. Leave a like and leave that comment like I just said, and subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any daily uploads. We are uploading daily right now, so go check out any recent videos that are up on the channel. Also, click on the top right corner to watch my latest video, and I'll catch you guys later. Goodbye.
I see red.